So we're going to start now. We're very much in the start, but let me also at this moment pause and open us in prayer. So let's pray. Lord, we are seeking to be your people who are called into such a time as this. Please give us eyes to see what you would have us to see and wisdom to know what to do with it. That is the process that we are going through as a group together, is to discern your work and your will in this place, in this time, in this moment. So help us to be open to what we learn about today, and help us to be open to how your Spirit moves among us. We ask all these things in your holy name. Amen. All right, I did talk a little bit about, why this question, why now, in the sermon, but just to hit those high points again, we are now in a pretty healthy place in our church. Thank God, thank you all. That's been some good work that you guys have done, right? We're in a healthy place in our church. We are also in an incredibly growing community, and with that growth comes a lot of joys and a lot of challenges. And so, we'll be talking about that. So we'll be spending some time on that. Why this question? Why now? What the process will be? We will also be talking about pressures on our church, both the local and the wider Christian landscape. We'll be talking about pressures on our community, as I mentioned, growth, housing, pantry, and neighbors. And we're going to center around the values that we're going to name that will help us make this decision. All right. And then I'll share with you what next steps are and how to participate. All right, so that's how we're going to flow today. All right. Now, what this lunch is and what it is not, this is a learning lunch, not a town hall or a debate. We will have times later in the process for us to have discussion in a bigger format. We're going to move to small group conversations after this. But later on, when we've sort of narrowed things down, we'll have time for more collective discussion and debate, but that's not for today. I want to affirm that we have made no decision, even though the press sometimes makes it seem like we have, even though you may have heard, oh, we're definitely going to do this. And there's no definitelys here. We are going to decide this together. The goal today is shared information before shared conversation. Like I said, it's kind of giving us all a level learning and playing field to work from as we consider this. We will take your questions and comments in writing and online, which I mentioned how to do that. And then note that small group conversations will follow in later days, where we will very much encourage dialogue. Okay? All right. So we're going to start out with the how we're listening together, the process, and the covenant. First, we want to name that there's anxiety. When we're talking about a decision like this, there is anxiety to it, but we're going to not let the anxiety lead. We want to acknowledge that there have been other discussions on what to do with the land and how to expand our church. Some of those in the not terribly distant past. It's been about 8 to 10 years ago now. And we acknowledge that some of those discussions caused real hurt and division. Big decisions, there's going to be a lot of emotions around it, and that's okay. We want to make space for those emotions, because when you're making a big decision like this that concerns how we care for God and God's creation around us, I expect you to be emotional. It means something. So there's some emotion behind that, right? But we're hoping that this process will create a space where those emotions can be shared without being used against each other and dividing one another. We will also recognize that media attention has created some assumptions that we are definitely developing affordable housing. That's not the case. That is the buzzword, and that is what got picked up, right? And that is a consideration. We do want to very seriously look at that. But that's not a decision we do as a cabal of small group of people, right? We make that decision all collectively together. We will acknowledge, as is evident by who's sitting up here, that the Affordable Housing Working Group has helped begin the work. This was a group of people, this came out of the 4 questions conversations, people that were mentioning that they were really worried about housing in our community. and housing for our children, for our grandchildren, for people that are vulnerable. All of those things were coming up, so we brought this group together to then start looking more deeply at the issue. And as a result of that, like I said, we split into advocacy and what could we ourselves do with the gifts that God has given us, especially in the form of that land. So they've been significant in bringing this forward, but there's no predetermination here. They're not controlling this outcome. They're just bringing their expertise and their passion into the conversation. And we've designed a process to protect transparency, pace, prayer, and participation. I mentioned in the sermon that we have a covenant for how we're going to engage in this conversation, and I encourage all of you to get a copy of that covenant or look at it online. But I did talk about the high points of that in the sermon today. We're going to be transparent. We're going to honor all the voices. We're going to remember that we are seeking God's will and seeking to be a church and not a business. We're going to recognize that decisions can be changed until they can't, and we're going to be open to the Holy Spirit, right? So, and if we need to slow down, there is a timeline spelled out in that, which I'll go over in a minute, but if we need to slow down, we will. All right, we started asking this question because the West Campus is a once-in-a-generation stewardship question, right? The west part of it. Whatever decision we make will have impact for years to come. Any of the 4 decisions will have impact for years to come, all right? And so that's why we want to take this slowly and intentionally and carefully and collectively. The decision will shape our ministry, our finances, and our witness for decades, all right? So that's why it's important to take it seriously. The 4 questions, conversations repeatedly surface the care for our vulnerable neighbors, including their housing and their basic needs, is a passion of the people of this church. And so it makes sense for us to ask how we can better address those needs. Faithful Foundations helped church leaders understand what is possible with church-used land. For those of you that aren't familiar with what that program was, I mentioned it a little bit, but it was developed specifically to help churches know how they can develop their land. And it was developed for how churches could use their land to address the housing crisis. So that's full disclosure as to what that program was. In the course of that, we determined some significant needs in our church. The pantry, which Joanne will talk about in a minute here. You don't have a parsonage for your pastor, and as housing becomes more and more unaffordable, that becomes harder and harder, not just for your pastor, but for your church staff. We need more community space, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And we need, and the community needs housing. Since we did Faithful Foundations, it's also become very clear that parking is an issue too. So we've kind of added that one in. So while, like I said, a kind of small group has been working on this, we're now widening this out to the whole congregation. So I want us to, there's going to be questions throughout this that are obviously not for you to answer right now, because I just told you this is not a question and answer scenario, but questions for you to hold in your heart and to be praying about. How can our church live our welcome statement and love our neighbors related to use of the land? So that's one question to consider and hold. We have determined 4 faithful actions that are before us. Now, these are the 4 that we have studied and come to determine. We are open to the Holy Spirit moving and there being other ones, all right? But these are basically kind of the main directions that we could go. And I'm going to talk briefly about each one and give some kind of examples, but I want you to understand with all of these, with the possible exception of D, with all of these, there are a lot of possibilities within them, okay? A is to sell the land and invest it. That land's worth around $4 million that we're talking about, so there's some talk about just selling it. Then what we do with those funds could be any number of things. We could put it all in the endowment and then use it to generate interest and fund ministries going forward. We could put some of it in the endowment, use some of it to buy a parsonage, use some of it to sponsor Habitat for Humanity houses to help address housing. Use some of it to, invest in the pantry. There's any number of things that we could do with the money from it, okay? So that's one option. B is church-led development. And this is something that churches know how to do, right? Which is where the church says, all right, we're going to put an expanded community space out there. We're going to build pantry space out there. We're going to build a parsonage out there, and we're going to fund it all. We're going to do fundraising. We're going to get loans. We're going to seek out grants, but it's all going to be done in-house, and it's all our church's responsibility to design it and to raise the funds, and then to pay for whatever development that we do, okay? That's what's called a capital campaign, right? So that's what that would be, and we would do a capital campaign. In that particular option, the church maintains it, with the exception of, obviously if we get loans, the bank has some say. But the church maintains control, full control of what all happens on the land, okay? Option C is a mixed-use partnership, and that is where we partner through shared development or a ground lease with another community entity. That can be another nonprofit. There are a number of nonprofits now that specifically do housing development, community development, those sorts of things. They raise money to help other institutions be able to address those kinds of needs. The Accelerate Foundation is an example of that. They're doing the teacher housing in town, okay? There's a number of other nonprofits that are out there. We could also partner with a for-profit developer. And in those cases, y'all, we control the main piece, which is the land, right? We're bringing the big chunk to the table, which means that we can decide what limits we set on a partnership. We can say, yes, you can develop 20 for-rent housing units on that property. One of those has to be held for church staff. A third of those has to be held at affordable rate. A third of them held at middle income rate. A third of them can be market rate. We could say, yeah, you can build a high-rise apartment out there, but the bottom floor needs to be the pantry. And you're basically gifting that to us, right? There's a whole bunch of things that we can do to set those kinds of parameters. And it's our land, so we come to the table in ways that we are comfortable coming to the table. Is there going to need to be some give and take? Yes. But at any point that it gets into a place that we're not comfortable, we don't have to go forward. Remember, decisions are reversible until they aren't, right? Okay? So that gives you kind of a general sense of what a mixed-use partnership looks like. And then D is to do nothing for now. It doesn't mean do nothing forever, but it means we feel like at this point in our church and our community, the timing is not right for whatever reason. We're just going to leave it be for now, okay? Each of those options has gifts, has costs, has risks, and faithful possibilities. All of them, okay? So any one of those is going to have its challenges. Any one of them is going to have its advantages. And that what we're trying to decide is which one's going to fit best for us in this moment. All right, Josh.
Thank you, Michelle. Well, real quick, my name's Josh Stacy. I know I recognize some faces out there. I'm sure some of you may be seeing me for the first time. My family and I, who are sitting in the back, recently joined the church about a month ago. We've been coming for about 18 months. But I grew up a United Methodist all my life in Kansas, and then we've refound this. We've lived in Bentonville or Northwest Arkansas for 18 years, so we've been here for a while, but have taken our time to find the right place for us to fit. And I would say that one of the big reasons why we chose here is the mission, and then also because this is a church that doesn't just talk the talk, that walks the walk. We're having hard, big projects and discussions and decisions that, like what we're talking about today. This is a huge undertaking. What this conversation is, the amount of work, the decisions that are made is a significant decision that not many churches out there are capable of having. So very much lucky to be a part of it. I'm part of the housing committee. I'm also part of the creation care team here at the church, so I've been lucky to be able to give back a little bit in those settings. I'm really talking about kind of how this process is going to look and kind of how this is going to go. So this is really the kickoff. Obviously, this is the first of the lunches. The committee and kind of as they came through the Faithful Foundations program, the committee's really been looking at the information that was given during that program, what our options are, and then really trying to package it on how we bring it to the congregation. The committee has not been sitting back going, what do we do in the sense of which is the choice that we want to go forward with? The committee has been saying, this is not our decision, this is a congregational decision. We need to find the right way to package it and bring it forward to everybody and making sure every single person has a seat at the table to give input and have all the information. So over the summer, it's a big listening session, all the different groups. Michelle mentioned all of that earlier. So that would be what we focus the summer on is listening and learning. In the fall, we're going to take all that information, kind of put it together, start to see, is there a direction the church is giving us that we want to explore further? As Michelle mentioned, there's almost an infinite number of possibilities on each of these choices, A, B, and C. So what do we do with that? How do we bring some more information, bring a better organized and thought through idea back to the church before hopefully in late winter or possibly in the first of next year, we actually bring it to the church for an organized vote on what do we do. And that's, Michelle can talk about it. It's a whole process. The regional church comes in and actually administers that, so there can be no interference from the church leadership or anybody here. That's done by an independent group in the Methodist Church, so there can be trust in how that process goes. It won't be something that is rigged or anything. Not that anyone up here or anyone in the church would do that, but you can have faith in how that process is going to go. So that's kind of a brief kind of view how this is going to work. Again, if we get into the fall and realize, listen, we have more work to do, we may push deadlines. We're not going to make hasty decisions. We give ourselves timelines and deadlines to keep us accountable to you all. But at the end, we're not going to rush a decision and do something that people aren't feeling comfortable with. So to have faith in that as well. I think, and I'll talk about this here in a little bit as we go, but one of the things the Faithful Foundations program discovered is that in Northwest Arkansas alone, there's 4,500 acres of undeveloped or developable land that churches own. And when we talk about community needs and things, that's 7 square miles of land that's sitting there that something could be happening with that currently isn't. So I think when you think about our church happens to be one that has a small piece of that total acreage, but this is a bigger Northwest Arkansas opportunity for lots of churches to be doing things like this, and we'll share examples about how their churches are doing that. Ray said it earlier, Michelle said it. I think we want to just over and over again hammer the point of transparency is what our goal in all of this. We want you to know every step of the process, everything that's happening. There's not going to be any backdoor decisions. There's not going to be anything that isn't put out in front of everybody to understand what's happening, and that all the information is given to you all the time. We also, again, want to make sure everybody has the ability to give information. Michelle said it today in the sermon, mission alignment over financial optimization. We're going to do what's best for the church and the community, not necessarily just what's best for the bank. We keep saying decisions are reversible until they aren't. We're going to move forward and be able to pivot until a formal decision is made. I kind of took this faithful stewardship means asking hard questions. And I think we're hoping in the spirit of this becomes when people start to get in these conversations, and there's going to be disagreements, somebody's going to have one opinion, someone's going to have another. That's going to happen. We want that. We welcome it. But hopefully we can all go into it with some grace, assuming good intent from the other person, and be able to show how we can disagree respectfully and in a way that moves us all forward. And we can challenge without being hateful. We can, we're stubborn. We can have listening ears and hear what people are saying. And again, what's the best for the church and what is best for the community? It may not be the same answer, and that's going to be a tough question or time to look through of what is the right step forward, because, $4 million sounds really good to have in an endowment, but is that what's best for the community? We don't know yet. So those are things we're going to have to tackle. And then just openness to the Holy Spirit, I think, as we go through it. Where is the Spirit guiding us? How are we keeping ourselves vulnerable and open enough to follow that guidance and not just making a decision and being hard on it and not listening and doing those things. So. And then obviously, as we've talked about how you can participate, you're already here. This is step one. Thank you for showing up and spending some of your Sunday afternoon with us. We know this is your free time, and we're asking a lot for you to be here. But again, there's a number of ways to do it. We really suggest that you come to one of these groups if you're already in a group, or you can sign up for one of these small groups. It'll be a place to talk and learn and just discuss amongst each other, where you can really start having those meaningful conversations. And then on Wednesday, August 19th at 6 p.m., there's an expert panel that's going to be here to kind of present on just here's what other churches have done, here's what opportunities that exist. These are experts from Faithful Foundations or other groups in the community that are doing work like this already that can just come in and say, here's some ideas, here's some options, help answer some questions and do some things from what's already taking place. And then again, just stay updated, read the emails, check out the website. And as I pass it back over to Michelle here, I think the question that's listed for you is, imagine our church 10 years from now, and what role does the land play in that vision?
Okay, so I want to talk about some pressures on our church, and this is both. We're going to talk about our church specifically, and then we're also going to talk about the wider Christian church. So, as we've been able to celebrate today, we're in a good place. We're healthy. We're growing, and we are a pretty young congregation. We have grown 21% in-person worship growth in the last couple of years. We have grown 82% in our online worship growth. And people ask me a lot of times, well, how engaged are those folks? Engaged. I mean, not all of them, right? Some of them are just passing through. But we have folks that are online that are giving. We have folks that are online that ask for prayer requests. We have folks online every week that join us for online communion. They're engaged. They're out there. And they very much appreciate having a church that they can come to and be part of in whatever life situation that they're in that keeps them from being in person in a church. We have a rough average congregant age of about 27 because of the number of children that we have. The number of people that are under the age of 18 draws our overall age average really down. So it makes us an incredibly young congregation overall. And our building is in active use 7 days of the week now. There is not a day that our building is closed and not being used by someone in the community. And it is over 20 nonprofits that now regularly access and use our space. And we are grateful and think of that as a gift we can give to the community. So many nonprofits are under tremendous pressure right now and really struggling to raise funds. And I met with one of them. I stuck my head in. It's a new one. The League of Women Voters is meeting here now, and I said, hey, we're really glad you are here. And they said, we're just going over our budget, and we're able to do the work because you've given us this space. We don't know where we would be. The senior talks that we host every month now started when we told them they could use our space without any charge. They started crying in front of us. I mean, it's tough out there for nonprofits, and the fact that we're making this a space where so many of them are finding a home is a wonderful thing. We have a Down syndrome theater group that's about to start rehearsing, and they're going to offer a play here. You're going to hear more about that next week. So there's just a wide variety of nonprofits that are making use of our space, and we would love to be able to expand that, to make more people at home in God's house if we could. Healthy growth creates both gratitude and pressure. The question is not, are we okay today, but what will faithful preparation require for the next generation? That's what I mean when we're looking at a generational question here. And so we've hit capacity in spaces and programs. Does that change how you think about using this land gift? Let's talk about some of the pressure in our walls. As many of you know, in January 2025, the 9 o'clock service hit 100% capacity. And so we launched Unplug in response. Now, some people have felt like, well, now we're not at 100% capacity in 9 o'clock, and we don't have to get chairs out all the time anymore. We still have to get them out sometimes. But yeah, that's why we started a new service, so we wouldn't have that same kind of pressure. Our attendance is still really up, and it's still growing, and it's going to continue to grow, and so we're going to continue to have that pressure, gratefully. The nursery needs to expand to a second classroom, which requires additional staffing support, which we talked a little bit about being able to add that additional staff member into family ministries. That would be one of the places where that could happen, and could really help out and make our spaces more welcoming and safe for our children. We have no single child-safe space to hold all of our elementary-age children for a large event. Hines Hall is not actually safe space because of all of the equipment, right? So there's nowhere they can go that is safe for elementary school kids. Our family ministry staff is just having to constantly be creative and split the group up a lot. So that's an important thing to remember. VBS has hit capacity 2 years in a row, and the capacity is space. We don't have any place to put them. So that means also security, infrastructure, and midweek ministry needs are becoming much more complex. Thank God we have a full-time facilities manager now. Oh my God, we could not do what we do without that reality. But it is getting more and more and more complicated as the need continues to grow. All right, as we mentioned today, we're financially stable, but somewhat lean, right? We ended in the black by $9,000 in 2024, 2025. Obviously, you heard today we're going to end 2026 very much in the positive realm. We were able to close that gap. Do you remember the 200 by 500 that we had to do last budget year? Closed that gap, but it did expose some giving vulnerability. In that we overly relied on a few givers. I will tell you that since we did that 200 by 500 challenge, we're actually spread out now. So we're much more able to handle if somebody passes away or if someone moves. Now, it actually does not, there's not a single giver that's going to deeply impact us the way we faced in that anymore. So grateful for that. We have a 6.7% increase in this year's budget. We've grown worship and programming by 26.6% to meet family ministry demand, primarily. But our building gets older every second. And Angie, who was here doing OMP last week, those of you that were all here, some of you, if you go in the workroom right now, it's a disaster because we lost a whole bunch of ceiling tiles to a roof leak. We know the sanctuary is about to face some significant repairs. As the building gets older and older and older, the number of repairs that are required are more and more significant. So these are things that we need to be thinking about and planning for. And Matt is working on a amortization schedule, so we know we can anticipate when air conditioners are going to go and plan for that, when electrical systems need to be repaired, all of that. I will say one of the things that's out there in the ether in this conversation is including this campus, this part of the campus in renovations or in a new vision. So That's not off the table. It's out there because of these very realities that the building is getting old, in all honesty. Okay? So a question to consider, what are your biggest concerns about selling the land or concerns about developing it? So kind of hold those thoughts in mind or jot them down on your piece of paper. Now talk about the wider Christian landscape. The younger generations, nobody counts Gen X. They're rarely in the figures because we're just, I don't know, we're the ignored generation. Millennials and Gen Z, and we're starting to now see Gen Alpha come up, but millennials and Gen Z for sure are as generous, if not more so, than the generations that are older than them. The difference is the generations that are older than them gave almost exclusively to the church. Millennials and Gen Z give to a wide variety of entities. So that means that religion's share of U.S. charitable giving has fallen significantly over the past generations. I actually have those statistics. Let me tell you what they are. It's religion's share of U.S. giving has fallen from 50% in 1994 to 23% in 2024. So cut in half, all right? Also, Methodists have the lowest tithing rate among Protestants. Look where we are, number one, at 12%, all right? And so those are trends. They're going in that direction. And barring some significant cultural shift, they're going to continue going in that direction. So we have to be aware of that. We also have to be aware that people give first digitally and that mission shapes engagement. It's another thing about the younger generations. If you're not doing something that makes a difference in people's lives, you're not worth investing in. That's just all there's to it. And I will tell you that we are outperforming many national attendance trends and giving trends. The average person, when they become engaged with a church community, does not start regularly giving nationally until they've been a member of a church or been regularly attending a church for at least 3 years. That's the average. We close that gap in less than a year, actually, typically, which is phenomenal. And that is largely due to the fact that, like Josh just said, we are doing something with the gifts that are given to us and using them to make a difference in people's lives. So it matters. It matters what you're doing with your money. Our growth is real. The national headwinds are real. So faithful stewardship is going to ask us to hold both truths. So this question for us to carry: we're a growing young congregation in a moment when church giving is changing the fastest. What does it look to plan for the church our grandchildren will inherit, not just the church we are today?
So I think everybody knows that Bentonville is a rapidly growing city. Northwest Arkansas is one of the most rapidly growing regions in the entire United States. And, those pressures, we see them in the community. And this is kind of what we're talking about now, is that the bigger need of the community, not just inside the walls of this church. When I first moved here 18 years ago, I think the population was 36,000. Now we're at 65,000 today. By 2030, which is just a few short years, we're going to be at 75,000. I actually think that's low. But by 2050, when you look at the next slide and see how many houses we need by 2050, it's because Bentonville is expected to be at 140,000 people by 2050, which means there's 170,000 new homes needed by that time to accommodate that number of people who are moving here. Currently, Bentonville's homeowner rate, because of pricing, is 50%, which means obviously 50% of the people that live in Bentonville don't own their own home. The American dream, so to speak, isn't obtainable to those people. And then, as Michelle mentioned today in the sermon, the cost for housing and transportation against income is 45% of income in Bentonville. As she mentioned, Nashville is 43%, Austin, Texas is 42%, and Manhattan, New York is 36%. So we are more expensive to live here from a housing and transportation standpoint than it is those mega cities that I think oftentimes people would never think that that's the case. A healthy percent is 1/3, so 33% of your income spent on housing and transportation is what the national agencies say is what is a healthy city ratio. So we are over 10% higher than what is technically healthy. But why does that matter for what we're talking about? To continue to kind of hammer the point, an average home in Bentonville is $500,000 now. The average median income, though, is just over $100,000, which means, if you do the math, those people can't afford to purchase a home because they can't get the loan that's required to do so. So going back to why that 50% number exists. Who are the people that are most affected? It's the teachers, it's the nurses, it's the first responders, it's the church workers, it's the people in nonprofits. It's not the Walmart execs, it's not the people making, the big money and moving here from other places. It's the people who are doing, the blue collar work, so to speak, and they're getting priced out more and more every year. As Pastor Michelle said, right now we don't have a parsonage. To give you just a little bit of history on that, and please tell me that when I get this wrong. For a long time, churches would buy parsonages for pastors, and what that would lead, though, is when they retired from their pastoralship, they had no equity, they had no home, they had no investment to. Now they're kind of like, what do they do? So churches started where it was feasible, and Bentonville was one of those places, not that long ago, where it was affordable. They would allow the pastor to buy their own home, make it part of their salary, or however they would, a stipend, or however it would be done, and so they could build that equity and have that. Well, Bentonville market went from the average home price of $250,000 to $500,000 almost overnight in just a matter of a few short years, and when that happened, it left the church now vulnerable to this issue of the pastor doesn't make enough to be able to afford to buy a home, and it's not just pastor, it's the support staff. It really hinders the ability as staff are going to turn over eventually, because they all do. Who's going to be able to come in and replace them, from maintenance workers to associate pastors to whomever. It's going to impact who we can actually attract to the church, and if they're going to even be able to live in the town, in the community that they serve or not. So there is a big need on the outside, and I work for the city of Bentonville. A lot of people, and I've heard it, for a long time, well, this is the city's problem, and it is a city problem, but the city doesn't have the resources, funding, ability to solve this problem. It's one of the entities amongst the hundreds of entities that have to come together to find solutions to this. And the church has, again, as we talked about in the Faithful Foundations, the church has land. What's the right thing to do with it? So the question posed, how do you think about the church's responsibility to the broader Bentonville community? Does that inform your thinking about what this land could become? I want to pass it to Joanne.
Before Joanne, I do want to share one funny. When we were talking about the pressures on staff housing in a staff meeting, I said, one of the things that we could do is build housing that could house our entire staff out on the green space. And they all just kind of looked at each other and said, do we all want to live together? Anyway, it's a thought.
I have thought about that too. Hi, my name is Joanne DeVinny. I've been coming to this church now for 26 plus years. And one of my big passions, I think many of you know, is the pantry. And I don't know if any of you have been here on a Tuesday, but I was trying to come up with something, and I was thinking about Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down, because on Tuesdays we are running around in that space down at that end, and we're running into each other. We don't fall down, but we are it's very, very crowded. And that's one of the things that we've been talking about as a pantry board. A year ago, we had over 100% increase in clients or neighbors that came. This year, we're running about a 17% increase. When housing and transportation consume too much of a household's income, what seems to fall to the wayside can be food. And as our building is being used 7 days a week, There is down there 3 classrooms. That could be 3 more classrooms for our church if we could have a designated pantry. And if you come in here on Tuesday, we are taking that whole end of the church, plus we're taking all the office, in front of the office too. We're using that space a lot. And we could use more space. We would like more space, but So if you got the pictures, so our pantry has outgrown its space, and but we're functioning and we're doing it. We have over 30 people that come in on Tuesdays and help out, and all volunteers. And we appreciate everybody that does it. We appreciate what the church has been giving us. Church gives us a space. Church gives us a lot of food. One thing we would like, though, is to have what would be called client choice. And client choice is when a client can come in and we can say to them, okay, you can have three cans of vegetables, but they don't have to take corn and green beans, which is what I give them every single week is corn and green beans. We can maybe give them, maybe they don't need corn and green beans. Maybe they could use a can of tuna, or they could use some flour, or they could use something else. Client choice needs space, though, because they need to have some room to move as we bring the clients into the space. So that's one of the things that we, as a pantry board, would love to be able to do, and we're kind of pushing that. We would love to have this space for to be able to expand.
Yeah, and when we did this with Faithful Foundations, the pantry's working with roughly about 1,200 square feet. And you needed at least double that, like 2,500 to 3,000 square feet is what's really needed. And we just don't have the 2,500 to 3,000 square feet to give them at this point.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kate Schaefer. I'm a little hoarse today, so forgive me. I've been coming to this church since we moved to Bentonville, so 9 years. And I've been really lucky that for some reason God plunked me in 2 cities, Arlington, Virginia, and here, 3 blocks from a Methodist church, because I'm a Methodist 4 generations on my mom's side. So I've never even considered going to another church, even the 4 years I spent at a Baptist university. So for that reason, I'm talking a little bit about how we choose, naming how we choose, and being grounded in our values. And most of you know the Methodist, the Wesleyan quadrilateral. We talk about it a lot. And tradition is one of those 4 pillars, and it plays a big role for us. And you can really trace a lot of decisions that are made in our church, and in fact, we try to name that back to our social principles. One of them is our communion table. And we hear Pastor Ray and Michelle say this every single Sunday, and if you ask a lot of people, this is many times why they chose to join the Methodist Church, because we have open communion. It's God's table, not ours, and our church family is welcome to all. And I encourage you guys to go back and look at our welcoming statement again and read it. We talk about welcoming and celebrating every race, gender identity, sexual orientation, marital status, age, physical and mental ability, national origin, economic station, and political ideology. And I feel like we really live into that. Another thing is our track record in outreach here. Our church started Helping Hands. Y'all know it's more than a thrift store, I guess, but y'all know about Helping Hands. We were instrumental in the organization that started Legacy Village, the community not too far from here that allows mature people to put equity and own a home without ruining the bank. The pantry, we've already talked about that, and we're all familiar with the pantry. You guys also know that we have a daycare that runs out of here, We Friends. And I didn't even know this until we were all meeting another organization called Explore and Discover. That's like a parents stay out, provides a really big resource to our community. So we have a history of that in this church. Michelle touched on this, but the 5 years of the 4 questions that were put out to the congregation, the care for the vulnerable came up repeatedly. As an answer in the 4 questions. And when I talked about tradition, I don't want to go too far into this because you can read it yourself, but the social principles affirm housing as a critical human right and advocate for justice and housing access in multiple sections of the social principles. Some of the most relevant excerpts are that shelter is a basic human right, right alongside food, education, and liberty. That the principles call for the reform of societal structures to ensure that all people can thrive. It talks about health care, emphasizing the right to decent living conditions, explicitly naming safe housing as a component of human well-being. And many of you might know that a passion of mine is paying attention to the Arkansas State House. And so you know that we do not have standards of habitability in Arkansas as part of the law. And we also have absolutely zero renters' rights. So this is one of the worst states to be a renter in. The worst. I guess it's a good state if you're a landlord, but not if you're a renter. The principles also connect housing justice to broader health and economic stability. They also talk a lot about elders and the aging. It advocates for accessible and publicly assisted elder housing and for policies that allow elders to live with dignity. And I can speak to this firsthand as somebody who took care of my mom for 8 years with dementia. And we got in a little too late on their financial condition. And so Greg and I were blessed and fortunate to be able to have the money to pay for her. But a lot of people are not able to do that. And it was extremely expensive in the last 5 years of her life. People with disabilities, the social principles call for the protection of the rights of people with disabilities, explicitly including the right to housing. Migrants, immigrants, and refugees. The principles recognize housing as a part of the essential support that migrants need and urges the church to assist with access to housing. They're so fascinating if you've never read them. So again, in summary, the principles support housing as a basic human right, efforts to create affordable and safe housing, church advocacy on behalf of the unhoused and underhoused, and a vision of society in which all people are able to live in dignity and safety. So it's important that we name our values and we understand our values going into this next few months of discernment and conversations.
And then I'm going to talk about the scriptural witness. We work really hard at not using scripture as a weapon or using it to be manipulative. So I always encourage people to look at the whole of the scriptural witness. Kind of key to that is that we're going to affirm that for us, the overarching key in Scripture are the greatest commandments: love God and love neighbor. And so that ought to be at the heart of everything that we do. Within that, we also want to name some other central themes that are at work in these considerations. One is, of course, the care for the vulnerable. And then one is to steward our gifts well, right? God gives us a certain amount of gifts, and we are meant to do something with those in a faithful and meaningful way, and to not be reckless and careless with them. And then I do want us to kind of hold in our hearts the letter of James, just simply because, and we're talking about centering our own values. Martin Luther called James a letter of straw, and he absolutely hated it. John Wesley called it the most Methodist of letters and absolutely loved it. And so much of what John Wesley really created as a foundation for us can be found in the letter of James. It's another one of those books of the Bible that doesn't mention God very often. It's funny that this keeps coming up. But what it does really get us to do is to think about how we live out our faith among each other and in our community. And there are two sections that I think are really important for us to remember. One is faith without works is dead. And that was part of the reason that Luther hated it, because Luther had all this guilt about whether he had been a good enough person that he then turned to, faith alone is what saves. John Wesley walked the middle line. We believe in sanctifying grace, that when we accept the saving work of Jesus Christ into our lives, we have a responsibility to continue to work for God and to bring God's reign and make it evident in the world around us. And we do that through acts of love, right? Finding ways to love our neighbor in concrete ways. So that's one piece to remember from James. But also, James, it's not the only, but it's one of very few definitions of religion in the Bible. Comes in the book of James. And he says a religion that is pure and faultless is this, to care for widows and orphans and to remain unstained by the world. All right? Care for widows and orphans. I think it's important for us to know that a widow in the Greek word for widow meant any woman of marriageable age who was unmarried. So that's divorced women and widowed women and single women. And the reason that they said widows, specifically widows, is because they were the most vulnerable in society. If they did not have the protection at the time of a male relative, they were subject to so much potential abuse. And then orphans, what an orphan was a child who did not have a present father. Again, this is a very patriarchal society that was defined in, but again, because those children were incredibly vulnerable, right? So I think what it encourages us to do is, again, do not lose sight of those who are the most vulnerable in our society. And then the remain unstained by the world. There's a lot of ways of thinking about that. But in the frame of this conversation, what I want us to remember is this is our decision as people of faith. This is not a decision we need to feel pressure from other entities around us. We need to know that this is our decision, and we're going to make it with as much as we can discern God's heart as possible. All right? And then there are a couple of others I've mentioned when we've started about talking about this. We talked about the parable of the talents. I still think we need to hold that in our heart because the one who is given the 5 talents, who turns it into 10 talents, and is abundantly blessed by God as a result of that. I think we need to remember that because 5 talents, when we do the economic translation into our current life, is almost exactly what that land is worth. So I think we need to remember that we are the people of the 5 talents, and we need to hold that in our head. And we need to think about Esther, and for such a time as this, that we framed up today. And then I want us to really, really work hard at trying to keep fear at bay. And so that's why I think 1 John 4:18, it says perfect love drives out fear. If we keep love at the center of it and keep fear at bay, then I think we'll get where we need to be. We can acknowledge the fears, as I mentioned today, but we can't let them make the decision for us. We're going to have to be the brave people. We're going to have to be the ones that make decisions based on love in the midst of all of this. All right? Now, there are 4 tensions that we need to hold and not resolve too quickly. They need to be shaping us. We need to hold this tension between stability and vision. We are stable today. That will not automatically secure us for tomorrow. So we're going to have to look ahead and try to discern what we need to do ahead. We need to hold our church and our neighbors in our hearts. The needs of our church are significant. We have named them. And we don't need to ignore them. They need to be at the heart of what we are trying to decide to do. But we are also called to love our neighbors. And so we cannot discount what the needs of our neighbors are either. We're going to have to hold those both together. urgency and patience. Timing does matter, but discernment should not be rushed. Y'all, when the article broke about us being part of the Faithful Foundations program, how many calls from developers do you think I got? It was a nonstop flow for a while there. I still get one, every couple of weeks or so. Hey, how y'all doing? Have you thought about doing anything with your land? Yeah, we're thinking about it. Don't talk to me right now is basically what I'm telling them, right? It's our decision. It's God's timing, and that's what we're going to look for. And then we have to hold faith and finance in prayer. I love this, prayer and spreadsheets both belong in the room, right? This needs to be an informed decision. We need to think intentionally about it, and that involves, having a realistic picture of what's before us and trusting that we can be people of faith and step out as well. All right? Okay. Now, for what happens next, we really do encourage you to take all of these one-pagers with you if you want. They've got more details on what we have talked about today, or to just pull them up online if you want to save a tree. I've already killed these trees, so feel free. But I know she's going to be so mad. Anyway, feel free to take them with you. Use the website. Keep up with things there. Please stay engaged. This is going to be a long process. Some of you probably think you have your mind made up and you're like, I just want to tell you this and then I want to move on with my life and, I'll just wait until the vote. And if that's your heart, you do what you got to do. But try to stay engaged through the whole process, because we really want this to be the right decision. And I really don't feel like it will be the right decision if it's not made collectively. God means for us to be a community together. God means for us to be a people together. God means for us to make this decision together. So please stay engaged. Ask any questions that you have. Plan to be as much of the things that you can be. If you can't make that panel on that Wednesday night. That, by the way, is the night that Children's Wednesday night kicks back off again. So the kids can go be part of that and the adults can come in here and have that panel. But if you can't make it that night, we're going to record it. We'll put it up. It'll be available. We're going to try to make everything as available as possible throughout this, and continue to just, like I said, use the online option for sharing comments and questions. Go in there as many times as you want, as many times as you think of something. We do want you to stay engaged and be part of that. And then, from here, give us your questions. Again, Connie's right over there for you to turn in your sheets. Sign up for the small group conversations, or plan to be part of your Sunday school class or small group or whatever when we have the conversations with them. Come to the panel. And then please, please, please keep praying. Pray for discernment. Pray for wisdom. Pray for humility. Pray for generosity. Pray for all of those things. And hold this last little bit. We will pray more than we plan and plan more than we worry. All right? Kind of hold that in your heart as well. I want to thank you for your attention today. Thank you for being part of this. Please encourage other folks to come to the next couple of ones. Tell them it's really important to be here. And like I said, from here, once we're finished with these three, we'll roll into the discussions. But I'm really, really grateful to y'all. And I'm grateful to my panel who's all been here to help share in this as well. Go forth from this place blessed and full, curious, hopeful, and knowing that God is with us. Thanks be to God. Amen.